only hours remain in your fantasy footy preseason. Yep, Thursday night, all the hard work you start to get locked out of. The rolling lockout commences. The players you want, the positions you've got, all those decisions start to become immovable, at least till late on a Sunday evening. Here on our final preseason strategy session, we are going to talk about all the big issues that are going to help you through these final few hours and days of decisions. We've got to talk about the players that I think over the past week have defined our sides and our structures. I want to help you navigate your way a little bit through who and how you should be really picking the players that are informing your structure and those last-minute tweaks. We've got to talk about those last-minute changes and how not to blow up your side, and some last-minute advice on the cards of this episode as well. Joining me on this podcast, as he has right throughout the past couple of years, it is the man that has Noddy at N1. Yes, N1, I did that on purpose. Got the captaincy on him, and he's repping some Coaches Panel merch if you're watching this on YouTube. Mini Mike, nice to see you. How you feeling about your sides just a couple of days out?
I'm nervous, you're making up a new position for me to put O'Driscoll into. Got me really thinking about what is actually going on with the rest of my team. But I'm feeling okay. It's a couple of days to go until we're all the way locked in. It's only a few hours until the Thursday lockout hits and we start to have to lock in our Carlton and Richmond players, which is exciting and slightly nervous. But let's talk you through it. Let's get ready for it.
Maybe we should actually start there, like going full rids and breaking the run sheet in the first 2 minutes. Those are the players that are getting locked in. Let's talk strategically how we should be looking at these players. I don't think there's anyone in our forward lines we're considering. I know Armstrong is a cash cow that's been named, but politely, there's enough options. We don't need to go there. Same with probably a Tom Lynch from a SuperCoach perspective in the rucks. TDK, pretty vital for us through that midfield line. Taranto, Chera, Hollands, Camporelli, Lawler all sit in there. And in the defensive lines, it's probably Short. That's the leading option. And a trainer, who we probably might start with him there. How do we position these players on field? Because I know the temptation could be, I just want to score playing. I just want to get moving. And sometimes I've had this happen to me in the past where you put the wrong bloke on the field and he spuds it and the fantasy regret is there before you've even had one completed game. How should we be looking to structure up our sides if we're looking at some of these players to give ourselves the best look at on-field scoring, but also not lock ourselves into something we don't need to just yet?
I think anyone that's not a rookie should be on your field at this point in the season. I think that it's pretty straightforward. You talked about Shaw, you talked about Hollands, Chera. They're all on your field. I don't think it's any questions about them. So the question becomes, what are you doing with Camporelli and Trainer? Personally, I think they should both be sitting on your bench, but I think they should both be sitting on your bench with an E. We don't like to loop rookie scores on in round one because we don't like to be running a red dot. That's fine. I'm not suggesting that you're running a red dot there, but it's more just for that insurance. You have that player locked away. If something hits the fan coming into the Sunday afternoon and a rookie that you expected wasn't named, at least you have a player that you can get a score off of and bring someone as a red dot in, potentially. That's my opinion. I don't think either of them are easy fields either. Yeah. I think that a lot of people might say that Trainer's 45, 50 AF, maybe a 50, 55 SuperCoach type scorer. I think that's probably what we would expect. I think we expect him to be a slow burn. Camporelli, I could hear an argument for fielding him, but I just don't see that he's going to be better than three other rookies that are probably going to be on your team in your midfield. So I think that that's why he needs to sit on the bench as well, personally.
Yeah, I'm with you. Look, if either of them get handed the vest, which Trainer's just not, politely, you're not picking someone at that height in defensive line. If Camporelli's a sub, I'd even hear a conversation to potentially fade him in its entirety. But I do think with the news of Hollands being out indefinitely, who is one of the other wingmen, I think also with his brother moving into halfback, just take it. We'll wait and see what Thursday presents. But to me, I do think he's going to get at least a decent crack of 3, 4, 5, 6 games on the wing. He's always a sub-risk, but politely, unless you're, a Levi Ashcroft type, you're probably a sub-risk for pretty much anybody that's in our rookie class.
He's probably the best 230K mid-rookie in terms of job security and minimize the chance of being a sub-risk. And to me, that's the type of player that you just actually have to pick. Especially because we don't know what's going to happen with a lot of the rookies that could come later on the round, whether they're going to be subs or not. And so locking one of these types of players away early is always going to give you a lot of flexibility later on in the round.
Yeah, it's really true. On this channel, we did a match review for every one of our 2 opening round clashes. If you haven't gone back and checked that out, please make sure you go back in a lot more depth. We review all the players that popped, the impacts, and what, from a fantasy footy perspective, you should and could do as a result of them. But I've really summarized elements of those reviews into 5 key players that I think actually have offshoots into other parts of our starting squad structure. The first player we've got to talk about is Will Day. Is he impossible to fade now? Not just from an ownership perspective, but also the fact that we know he's already got a bank score in his cash price cycle. It's a 3-week price cycle that we'll see in SuperCoach and Dream Team, while we'll get a double movement in AFL Fantasy after this week. It probably does require a splitting of the formats to really have the conversation in full, but can we fade Will Day? I'm not hearing enough for and against conversation. Coaches panel's popping in to bring some alignment for you.
Can we fade Will Day? Yes, in different formats. Potentially no in AFL Fantasy. I'm going to start with SuperCoach and Dream Team first, because I think this is actually the more interesting conversation. I think I can hear a conversation for fading him more, probably in Dream Team the most, and then in SuperCoach. Dream Team, he's priced at, I think, the mid-700s. Yeah, he's priced at 750, basically bang on the dot. You don't get the effects of that price change for another 2 weeks, and his next 2 fixtures aren't amazing. And then he has 1 more week, and then he's on his bye. If he knocks it out of the park in the next 3 weeks and is $850,000, $900,000 by the time he's coming off of his bye, I'll be shocked. But I probably I will say, I'll let that one go through the keeper. I should have picked him up. I think in SuperCoach, it's a very similar sort of argument. I think that there's a lot of concerns that his, output effectiveness will be diminished by the result of tags that are expected to come his way. We're talking about the likes of Durham this particular week. Bedford's also on the radar as well. I think that there's enough other options that you can see for, say, 50K more that can become genuine top 8 or close enough midfielders. Yes, Day was phenomenal on the weekend, but he kind of got off the chain entirely in that first half. He kicked 3 goals, I think, in the first half, then had 33 AF and 20 or something SuperCoach in the second half when he was tagged, and then pushed forward to try and get through the game. It only would take 1 poor score for that break even to kind of drop back down and for him to suddenly be stagnant. If you had him in your team before the weekend, absolutely hold him there.
Oh, sure.
But if you didn't, I wouldn't break your structure to try and bring him in. But I think in AFL Fantasy, the genuine question is now, can you afford to go against the crowd? The break-evens are in. AFL Fantasy, his break-even is -11.
Already.
-11. If he goes 80 as a floor score this week against Essendon with a Durham tag, let's say it's 80, that's him going up $60,000 to $70,000 this week alone with a low break-even. He's priced at 72. 80 is going 8 points above what he averaged last year with injury-impacted games, with sub-ons, sub-offs. You're going to be going against, it's already at 50%. It'll probably be closer to 60% by the time we get to the full lockout at the end of the round. I don't think that I can afford to go against an AFL Fantasy. I'll hear the argument in Dream Team. I'll hear the argument in SuperCoach. But in AFL Fantasy, I think it's really just an easy decision. And the question really becomes now, is he at M3, M4, or M5 for your team? And just trying to figure that out.
Yeah. And again, the reason you're going to fade him is more likely than not in AFL Fantasy, you're probably picking a mid-pricer in that similar vein or range, or even a premium. He's already banked what those guys are expecting to do. And unless you're going all the way up to the Brayshaw, the Dawson, this sort of Zach Merritt territory, well, you're still hunting an element of value. And while you don't get the score, you've already got that price moved, ready to go. Even if he doesn't play for more than 5 minutes, he's still going to make you money. And we keep thinking about the worst case scenario about what might happen with a tag this week. Well, what happens if he just goes that 95 sort of territory that I think most expected him to be in the preseason? Well, now all of a sudden you're staring down the barrel of a guy that before he gets to that Toby Bedford tag in the game before his bye, 100 to 150,000 of guaranteed money made, and you're very easily one trade away to jump into the slipstream of a Tom Green, who by then will be off his bye and will have had a look and see and maybe some price on the slide. So to me, I think all the stars have aligned in AFL Fantasy, that his ownership, the price movement, the fact that you've got the early pivot with the buy, the tag is there. But to me, is it impossible? No, nothing's impossible. It's just you're staring down and saying no to some banked cash, which I just can't bring myself to do. So I'm on that space.
And I think the other thing is that after the bye, yes, he does have that tough Port Adelaide fixture. But then 6, 7, 8 is Geelong, West Coast, Richmond. And so if it's not now, if it's a when. Like if it's not now and he's up to 900K at round 6, are you going to pay that to bring him in for that run? Maybe. But I'd rather just save the $150,000 right now and just hold him all the way through.
Yeah, I'm with you.
If you're worried, chuck him on the bench with an E next week, Round 2, we've got loops. Round 3, we've got loops. Round 4, he's a bench loop anyways. Yeah. We're in best 18. If he pops a poor score, you can get a Levi Ashcroft, or you get a Finn O'Sullivan, or you get a Lindsay, or one of your forwards or one of your defenders might pop a peak score and just cover it. Like I just think it's not worth overthinking for mine.
Yeah, I think so too. Finn Callahan is a different conversation again. You can probably diverge away in the formats there. He's just another player that's adding to this mid-price mayhem that Day's a part of. Now Callahan sits in there. Peatling is in there. Holland's at a little bit of a cheaper price, but he sits in there. Oliver sits in there. Chera sits in there. There's so many names that are just added to this mid-price mayhem. I think SuperCoach and Dream Team feel pretty easy to me. The fact that they've got the round 2 bye, he feels like the perfect parachute into option. If you're not really loving what you've got from your mid-pricer, he feels like the outlet if you want. You might have a different perspective. I'm keen on that. But AFL Fantasy, again, it's another tricky conversation because he does have already some banked score, which will affect that double price movement. And from a fixture perspective, it's not as bad as people think for the Giants early on.
No, it's not. I think I tend to agree with you in SuperCoach and Dream Team. I think if he shows it again in round 1 and he comes into round 3, because obviously they're on the bye in round 2, if he comes into round 3 with a low break even, he's shown it for back-to-back weeks, he's shown it potentially with Tom Green there as well, that's when I go, yeah, this is probably real. I might need to jump on. At this stage, I'm not quite there yet. I don't think it is real. I think it's one out of the box. I think the Pies looked pretty poor. I think they struggled with the weather, even though it wasn't as hot as it can get in Western Sydney. And I think he was just able to get off the chain, especially in that last quarter. Like he was just running past blokes that didn't have the fitness to stay with them. And I don't think that that's something that I'll expect to happen this week. In AFL Fantasy, it's different again because he's priced more expensive than Will Day and he didn't score as much as Will Day. And he has the round 2 bye instead of the round 4 bye. The break even for him is only the 25. So let's say that he goes a 90 and 95. That's still about 50 to 60K of movement. but he's also a player that not a lot of coaches were considering coming into 2025. I know that there were a few that had their eye on him. I personally don't think he has the pedigree that someone like Day does to be an accumulator and to be able to hit consistent 110 to 120 type scores to the point where it's going to burn me if I don't go with him. And to me, I think that it reflects in the ownership statistics between the two of them. You know, we've seen that Day's getting above 50% quite easily. Callahan's at 20%. I think that people would rather save the 30K and look at players like Oliver, look at players like Chera, look at players like Rosie, if a bit more, or Petrarca, rather than going for someone like Callahan. This all well could have been his spike score or one of his peak scores for the year. And I think that that's enough for me to say, I'll let this one slide through.
Yeah, I think so. Sue, third player, I think that impacts some of our structural elements a little bit. Probably someone outside of the draft community that I hadn't heard boo about this player, but now pops a relatively solid score in comparison to his price point. And that is Sam Wicks. We can bank that early acceleration, at least in AFL Fantasy SuperCoach and Dream Team. Again, he might be an outlet pick rather than a starter, but again, I think that's at least an option where it wasn't with a Finn Callahan. Is it worth going to a player like Wicks over, for illustration's sake, a Garcia, who he's going to be that 1 week price cycle movement behind? Is it worth that type of swap consideration given their pricing? Or is this structurally too deep on the bench? Does this do too much? Is he an early price accelerator that we can consider?
I think he's definitely an early price accelerator that we can consider. I also don't think it's too much to have him on the bench.
Yeah.
I think that that's where some people might be trying to think about it and trying to be too cute and saying, oh, I'm going to preface this and say, this is an AFL fantasy only play. You're not doing this in SuperCoach. You're not doing this in Dream Team. You're only doing this in AFL fantasy. His price at $393K. It's about $60K above the most expensive rookie that we're considering in our starting squads. He's priced at 37. If he goes 55 the next 2 weeks, he basically hits his price stat figure after 3 weeks. He'll be priced at about 55. It'll be about 550, 560K. That's 300K that you can scrape off of him down to a rookie that's probably already played a game, that has a break even. It gives you time to look at which rookie is going to be better. You know, we're talking about the likes of Berry, Kako, even someone like a Daniel Curtin as being forward rookies that we're actually considering. How about you give yourself a week or two to figure out which one of them is actually going to pop a decent score, which one of them is going to have a low break even, which one of them is got a better role, and then trade into it.
Yeah.
But then to answer your question about whether he's worth it over Garcia, my answer is probably no. And the reason why is because I feel very comfortable fielding Garcia at the moment. I think that at worst, he's the fourth Saints player in that midfield rotation. At best, he's the third. And that's a good CBA role. That's someone that you can bank on probably to get a 60 to 65. I don't think he has job security concerns. Some Saints fans, feel free to let me know that I've got it wrong. But from what I've seen, I think he was a good addition to that team. And so I think it's probably you put Garcia on your field. And if you wanted to put another rookie on field, because I think a lot of people are running like a Davidson and a Stone, if you're wanting to field one of them and you got enough cash, that's when I would be justified in saying, look, I think Wicks is a pretty good option to chuck onto your bench and give yourself a bit of time to figure out what's actually going to happen with the other forward rookies.
I think the other thing to consider is from an opposition perspective, Wicks, scored in spurts. He had 2 good quarters and then 2 relatively quiet. Now, again, for at least kind of a third of the game, it was pretty heavy rain. And so nobody was really accumulating the ball or transition scoring with ease. But he's there to play more lockdown than he is as playmaker. That's what Blakey, that's what Roberts is there in the side too. Over the next 2 weeks, he's got to find a way to keep the likes of Rayner, got to keep the likes of Charlie Cameron under control. And then the week after that, probably a date with a Shai Bolton types. These are very different territories of of class of small forward. And that's no shade on the Hawks small forwards, but these players are another level. These are premiership, game-changing, next level. Again, the Hawks smalls are really good, but Wicks did a pretty good job at holding them down. He's going to have his hands full at another gear again this week. So to me, I agree. It's for the depth, but not in place of someone. I had flashbacks on the weekend, Minnie, to about 3 years ago. I was coming off the back of, I think I was finished like 25th, 26th in AFL Fantasy, and I'm like, I'm pretty good at this. I know what I'm going to do. I'll start Rory Laird, an absolute gun of an AFL Fantasy player at M1. He's playing the Giants. There is Bunny. And what happens? He cramp dishes up a 60-odd. Flash forward a couple of years later, Nick Daicos almost does the exact same thing. The difference is coaches get the free out and it doesn't hurt their start of the season like it may have done for me all those years ago. But I want to ask you a question because I do think it's an anomaly. I think some of the media narrative around Nick has been ill-informed around a bunch of different evidence, and that's okay. People have to make content and conversations and be engaging. I get all that. My question after that is there a world in any format you can start Nick Daicos? Because I still think, despite what he gave us in opening round, I'd be shocked if he is not a top-tier, top 10 mid by the end of the season. Is there a world we can start Nick Daicos?
Port Adelaide this week, he's got a date with Willem Drew.
100%.
The week after, he's got the Dogs. I don't think they've got anyone who can really clamp down on him hard. And then he's got the bye. You're going to be probably, if you're buying him in SuperCoach or in Dream Team, you're probably going to be staring down a $50,000 to $100,000 price drop going into a bye and thinking he's got a pretty high break even. He's lost me a lot of cash. He's maybe dropped me a poor score. I don't feel great about this. I don't think there's a world where you can start him. I don't think that it's justified. But what I would be doing straight away already, putting a big red texter pen on your notebook saying Nick Daicos, round 5/6, buy.
Yeah.
If you're not eyeing him off at what could potentially be his lowest price of the season at that point, then you really need to be thinking about who else it is that's going to present more value than that. Because I can tell you right now, any coach worth their money is looking at him and waiting for that time to jump on when he bottoms out.
Yeah. Does that change the way, knowing that we've got this telegraphed trade here, Briggs could, to a lesser extent, be at that same conversation? He's not the same tier of player, but we've got these guys that we can look down the corridor of time with confidence now that, barring Daicos going 150 in fantasy, 200 in SuperCoach, we know some cash is leaking out of this guy now. Does that change some of either the players we pick or the risk profile that we need to take, knowing that we've got a banked option in a month's time that we want to get our hands on? Or to you, is it like, no, I'm still going to continue on despite knowing that this is here waiting for me just to scoop up in 5 weeks' time?
I think we just continue on. Yeah, I think there's too many things that can change between now and then. Like if you told me before round 0 started that Nick Daicos is going to go 60 and cramp up in the third quarter and basically not be able to run out the fourth quarter. Heck, if you told me 2 weeks ago that Errol Goulden was going to get his ankle trapped underneath him and be out for 3 months because he's, fractured his ankle, I would have been like, okay, that's not great. How can I advantage of that in the future? We thought that Angus Sheldrick was a surefire thing for that Swans midfield and that he was just going to take the time that Mills and Goulden were leaving behind. Well, he's just been subbed out after 2.5 quarters of playing on a Thursday night. You can't make assumptions about what's going to happen because there's so many variables. There's so many things. We've got 9 games of footy. We've got 18 teams, 400 odd players nearly across the weekend that will hit the field and play. You can't just change your structure because you eye off one player, but just have it in mind as to how you might potentially get there in the future. Don't forget about it. Don't fall it out of consideration, but don't go ripping your team apart just because you say, in round 5, I want to trade into Nick Daicos. I don't think that that's the right option.
Yeah, it's good advice. Last player specific, but I do think it comes to a discussion around structure, specifically in AFL Fantasy again, because he's in a team that has a bye in round 2, super coaches and dream teamers. Why add to your risk profile that you don't need? Get the extra game of data, know what the break even is, and then jump accordingly if required. But in AFL Fantasy, it's a little different. Is it worth starting Sam Taylor? Player we would never consider. Flat out say it. But after that 110 plus score, and at least on paper, a matchup that, while not historically great, there's no real threatening key position forward that he's coming up against to really have to play real super tight attention on. And I think when you put that and a very favourable break even, a 1 week play at a minimum, and maybe that's the max you look at anyway, keen on your thoughts. And then on top of that, the fact that I don't know a coach that likes their D6 at all. Even if it's a Sam Daicos, they're going, gee whiz, I just don't like the look of this. And I'm quite comfortable for Daicos at 6.
Right.
But there's a lot of the coaches going, I hate my D6 option. I don't like Pryor. I don't like Trainer. I don't like Reed. I don't like SDK. So is it worth just throwing it on a guy that is a 1 week play that's going to jump a minimum of $50,000? Oh, what's your take here on Sam Taylor? There's a lot of word vomit for you in that. Can we start him? Can we telegraph the 1 week play? And is this something in AFL Fantasy we should be considering?
I definitely think it's something worth considering. He's coming in with a minus 51 break even. This is like SC, DT type territories where they start to hit minus 100 break evens on the bubble.
Yeah.
This is like a mini bubble for someone like Taylor. He's priced at $528,000. It's not cheap. It's priced at about 50 points worth, of your starting squad value, and you've only got about 1,700 worth. But we wouldn't be doing it if we weren't so starved of options down back. We're talking about the fact that we might be going into round 1 with maybe 3 to 4 rookie priced players named. I don't know about you, but I want to see some of these players play first before I commit to actually buying them. Someone like a Pryor, someone like a Freya, someone like a Sam Daicos, someone, maybe even like a Liam O'Connell from St Kilda if he gets a game. It's the same idea as with Wicks, except it's just because we don't have anything we really like. Why not give it a wait and wait? He's going up in price. That's guaranteed. He's not going to score minus 51 this week. And if he does, at me for the rest of time, because I think the lowest of AFL fantasy score I've seen is a minus 9.
Game on.
Game on. If you can do it, Sam Taylor, I will. I'll find something for you. But if he goes a 50, which is well within someone like his wheelhouse,
that's his average.
That's like $75,000, $80,000 of price movement upwards. He goes from being 528 to 610K roughly. Let's say he gets a 60 or a 70. You're adding $10,000, $20,000 on top of that. It's a lot of money for one price movement for a player that you can then make a decision on. Let's say you like a Fraser, but you don't like the fact that he plays North Melbourne. You don't know what's going to happen with the Dale in this week. And he goes a 75 against North Melbourne and he looks fine with Dale in, and then he comes into good matchups and you go, you know what? I'm going to go there now. You can do that. If you like a Pryor and you're like, oh, I just want to see if he's actually best 22, I'm going to give it a week. You can do that. You make 300K downgrading to him next week anyways. It's like, it opens up a world of opportunity. It opens up the time. It opens up cash generation. But the downside is you're paying $530,000 for him, and you're banking in that you will have to trade him out. It doesn't have to be next week. It doesn't have to be at the end of round 1 because he is on the bye in round 2, which is useful for you if you've got a couple of rookies there and you want to get a look at them, or you've got other pressing issues. But you're on a time bomb.
Yeah.
He has to go quick. It's if he's in your team going into round 4, I think you got a problem.
You are locking in a trade of one of your first 2 to 6 trades of the year. Yeah. There's no escaping that. I'm always a little hesitant around telegraphing a must trade out at that point in time, because all it takes is 1 or 2 injuries, a couple of suspensions, and all of a sudden you're just spinning the wheels and not really making any progress whatsoever. But I think, as you beautifully talked about, the fact that there's just no options and he's as likely to score the 50 to 70 as anybody else that sits in that spot, and he's as likely to give you a 30 as anybody else in that spot for 1 week in AFL Fantasy at Spec 22. I can take it. I can deal with it. And as you've mentioned, we've got Trainer as a player that we're looking at what he could do Thursday night. We might just find an avenue where we can bank the cash and never have to field him.
Yeah, exactly. Look, I think the player that I can do the most comparison to is actually probably De Koning and Frazier are both the players that I can do the comparisons to. Sam De Koning's priced 30k more, roughly, and Joel Frazier's priced about 100k more. So 30k more, you say it's about 3 points. 100k more, it's about 10 points. Let's say that Sam Taylor does a 50 and Joel Frazier does a 75 and Sam De Koning does a 65. You've lost about 15 points worth of value because of the price in the 100k that you've been able to spend elsewhere for the gain of $100,000, $80,000 plus a week's worth of information.
Pretty helpful.
We're talking, Bolt has come out with the value of a trade being about 50 points. I think that, a week's worth of information, $80,000 to $100,000 worth of time as well. I'll take that deal. I'll take that deal every day of the week.
Yeah. You may or may not be running him at D6 just quietly. Maybe we should talk and help people across the formats. Who are the players that, barring an unforeseen injury, we're going to build our side around? Because in these final few days and hours, there's a lot of little bits of corrections. And I do want to help in a moment talk about the difference between the correctional adjustments that are using information that, as it comes to hand, whether it be a player's selected, debutant confirmed, sub confirmed, whatever it is, there's a difference between correctional adjustments and destroying our side with over tweaking. I do want to talk about that in a moment, but across the formats, are there some players that for you just go, look, barring something unforeseen, I will start them and I will build around them? I think it was a 7 essentials or must-haves you've got to have on the channel. You can go back and check that out. Maybe we should go line by line to look at that from a perspective to go, right, in your perspective, across the formats, you would say you have to is dangerous, but you're building around these guys, because I'm not too sure there's as many must-haves across the formats as people would suggest. Is Matt Roberts the only defender that for you is immovable, or are there some others?
Across the formats?
Yep.
Yes. The other two you could say, and this is just semantics, Zach Reed and Trainer are also, I think they're non-negotiables. I think those are the 3 that you build your defensive line around.
Yeah, like you mentioned, Short could maybe sit in there, but I'd hear a conversation for, at least in SuperCoach, to not have him. Perryman, maybe a little harder but again, is he a non-negotiable? That early buy doesn't make him a non-negotiable as far as I'm concerned. But it's going to be pretty hard not to pick him given the options we got. Rolling through there. What about the midfield? What are the non-negotiable picks for you? Is it just as simple as Levi Ashcroft and Noddy? Yep, I'm going to throw him into that mix as non-negotiable. I'll take that bullet for you, mate. Don't you worry. This is the Bodyguard Fantasy Footy Edition. Spoiler alert. Sorry, should have mentioned that. Are there any other non-negotiables in our midfield for you that no matter what, personally for you, you're like, nah, I will have this guy and I will build around everything else?
I'm going to put out 3 more.
Okay.
And people might disagree with these for one reason or another. I think Camprioli is a non-negotiable if he's not in the vest on Thursday night. I think you have to have him.
Agreed.
I'll start with the not controversial one. I think Clayton Oliver is a must-have across the formats.
Yeah.
Price tag, ownership, potential, history. It's all just there for me.
Yeah.
This is the controversial one. I think Adam Cherry is a non-negotiable.
Yes.
I think he has done everything you could want from him this preseason. Uninterrupted, faultless. Carlton midfield has been in and out, chopping and changing with injuries to other players, and he's been the one mainstay the entire time, who hasn't been injured, who hasn't been rested, who did his time in Qatar and is looking cherry ripe, like Elliot Yeo was at this time of the preseason last year. And for someone who has the potential to do 100 to 105 AFL Fantasy and 105 to 110 SuperCoach, to me, he is a non-negotiable.
Yeah, I like that. I've changed my tune on Chera. I've had moments where I've gone full Katy Perry, where I've been hot and cold on him at different times over these last couple of weeks. I'm smack there with you, mate. I'm all in, and the fact that he's got Richmond to start the year, my gosh, what a lay down knockout opportunity for you, and he's priced where the risk isn't really there. In the rucks, is there a non-negotiable pick? I've got a perspective. I'm keen on yours. Is there a non-negotiable pick?
I think that this is where you can split the formats.
Agreed.
I think that Flynn is a non-negotiable in SuperCoach.
Yes.
I think whoever is named of Boyd and Archer Reid is a non-negotiable for R3.
Agreed.
But I won't say that any other player is a non-negotiable. I think that you can make arguments for TDK. People will make arguments for Cherry. Some people make arguments for Gorn or for English. And I'll hear them. But frankly, I don't think I agree. I think there's a lot of flexibility in our ruck lines, except for Flynn. I think in SuperCoach, if Flynn is not at your R2 or at your flex, I would be having a think as to why he's not there, because he's a number 1 ruck. He's priced at $262,000. And if he does 6 weeks of 80s, he will be $400,000. There's your 150K.
Yeah, 100%. Forwards. Any non-negotiables that we're building around? Davidson certainly sits in that category. I don't think anyone's going to fight that one. McRae, I think, sits in that category as well as Caleb Daniel. I think those 3 will be very much uncontested. But then you've got Garcia, Stone, Sanders, Smith, Rankin, Horne-Francis, just to name a few. Hewitt, if he's named, which it seems like he's going to be, probably sits in that conversation as well. Any of those names also non-negotiable for you to build around across the formats?
Stone.
Yeah.
We saw enough on the weekend.
Yeah.
It's not like a league where you're worried he's going to be out of the 22. He looked fine. He put up a fine score. He's got the cash generation moving. He allows you to have a loop in round 2. I just don't think overthink it. Yeah, it's worth it. I will hear an argument for a lot of the other forwards, though. Like, I've had people tell me that JHF is a lock, that Rankin is a lock, that Baz Smith is a lock, that Garcia is a lock. I think that they're all quite good options.
Yes.
But I think you can achieve, I mean, even a Sanders is quite a good option, but I think that there's enough versatility and viability of options that locking your forward line around the 2 probably biggest value options in McRae and Daniel and the 2 best rookies in Stone and Davidson, you know, whether or not Davidson's at F6 or F7. I think that's up to you. But I think that those are the 4 that I would be probably building my structure around.
Yeah, and especially when just the fact that there's so much we don't like at D5 and D6, locking yourself into these must-have mid-price forwards as much as there's value. We do end up needing to sacrifice at times players we like for the structure that we need. And maybe we should stay on that point.
I was just going to stay on that point with you. I want people to notice that of the players that we've gone through and that we've mentioned, over half of them are rookie or rookie price type players.
Yeah.
And the most expensive player in that list was Clayton Oliver.
Yeah.
Like, he's not the premiums are never the must-have players. It's always the mid-prices that present irrefutable value and the rookies that have minimal job security concerns combined with reasonable scoring potential. And across all of the formats, it was 3, 7, 11 players that we said were must-haves. About 11 players, 1/3 of your squad. Frankly, if you think that there's more players that are must-haves than that, go for it. I would implore you to have a look again. There might be players that are non-negotiables for you. I did a breakdown of my teams, and I do this every year right before round 1, where I look at all the players that have been in there, and I say, these are the 20, 23, 24 players that I am not moving no matter what happens. And I fiddle around with the last 5 or 6 players, depending on what happens. But that doesn't mean that the other 14 players that I've added on top of the must-have list are must-haves. It means that they're players that I'm very comfortable starting.
Yeah. I'll give an illustration. Often here at the coaches panel, we don't talk about our teams all that often, or our success in rankings or things like that. The philosophy of coaches panel is very much it's to help support you, be an information for you to put yourself in the situation and apply it to your team, rather than try to go, oh, that's MJ's team, that's Minnie's team, that's Jordox's team, that's Louis' team. Oh, that's great for them. It's again, and it's no knock to anyone else that does that, by the way. It's just an intentional thing we do, not to talk about ourselves, but rather to make it all about you as the viewer and all about you as the listener. But I want to use it as an illustrative point to create a conversation, is where all coaches are making these last-minute correctional adjustments and these little tweaks. And sometimes in those tweaks, players that we've loved or desperately wanted to own or still see incredible value in these final few hours and days, fall away from our side. One of those players for me is a James Peatling. Now, he's still existing in some of my teams across the formats, but in AFL Fantasy, he's fallen out of my team, not because I think he's doing anything wrong, but to highlight the issues in my defensive line. I've gone, I don't want to run Pryor at D6, so I've got to sacrifice somewhere to fix up something else elsewhere. Talk us through, from your perspective, how do we know the difference as a coach? These last little tweaks where we're potentially saying farewell to people we have owned for a lot of the preseason. How do we know we're making correct, informed decisions as opposed to panic stations last minute destroying our side, and no longer it doesn't resemble what we had? What are the things for you that help you determine the difference?
God, you're asking the very hard questions tonight. That is, that could potentially be a car winning or 50K winning discussion point just there.
Yeah.
The players that you have in your team at any point during the preseason are there for a reason. They're there because they've had a role change, or they present value, or you think that they're going to outperform what they're priced at, pure and simple. And the players that have spent more time in your team tend to be the ones that you think have a better probability of doing that, be it because they present value that is irrefutable. You think that they're potentially 20 to 30 points underpriced. Forget the rookies, because I think that they will come and go depending on who's named. And as we get closer and closer and inch towards round 1 now, we know the ones that are going to be named, I think, and the ones that aren't. The clubs will announce those. It's just a question of whether they're subs. But all the mid-prices, all the premiums, they have been there for one reason or other. So if there's a player that you're tossing up as to why you think you might need to cut them to put another spot or bolster another spot, like you're talking about with your defensive line, go player by player and say, why is it that I want this player here? Why is it that I've had them this entire preseason? Are they priced at 70 and I can see them doing 90 over the first 6 weeks? If that's the case, that's a lot of value. I wouldn't be throwing it out willy-nilly. But if it's a player that you've said, look, there's a lot of the community that's really liked him. I think he's got 10 points of value if all the things go his way. That's when you kind of go, well, maybe this is the player that I'm not invested in. Maybe this is the player that I actually want to move on from and can use to bolster the other lines. And that's why I kind of talked about my approach before. I probably didn't go as in depth with it, but I look through my entire team and I say, these players have been here for 85, 90% of the preseason. They haven't given me a reason to take them out to this point. They're just going to stay there, and I can build around that because, you talked about the likes of Short, Roberts, Perryman, Trainer, Reed. I think that sort of structure locks me into 90% of what I want in a defensive line, and I can build around that if I have to. If I want to go expensive, you just knock them down a peg. If I want to go cheaper, you knock them up a peg, but you figure it out from there. I would implore coaches to follow some sort of a similar approach. Have a look at the 30, maybe get to a list of 20 to 25 that you're comfortable with, and only start fiddling around with those last few spots. Don't really knock the hammer out of your team and start it over again, because I think we're too deep into the preseason now to be doing that.
Yeah, we are. It's too far now to hit the clear team and go again. What has been happening over the preseason, again, using the Peatling as an illustrative point, again, I've got him in some other formats too. It was just specifically in AFL Fantasy that I've done that. It was like, well, information has changed from where things were a week ago. A Will Day has emerged, and now he's already on the acceleration treadmill to doing cash generation that I hope Peatling can, and I think they'll be comparable in score over the first month, and I've already got an extra bit of cash movement that sits there. I now know what mid-prices are going to get named in their role after seeing it play out. I know the cash cows that are going to be there, and so you will see these last-minute tweaks when you're using information that has newly presented itself to you, not something that has been sitting there for 6 weeks that you've just been blindly ignoring. That's the difference between being stubborn and going in and going, I will not change, I will not move, I always want this player, versus, well, things around them have changed. Things around my team have had to change. Structure has had to change. And so as a result, I am pivoting, and this is the outlet of how I'm going to get there, because as you mentioned, it's, well, player A versus player B. I pick player A, therefore player B has to become the outlet. Do those things clinically now, because let's get honest, it'll get to Thursday at around about 6:30 Eastern Daylight Savings Time, and all of a sudden, all of the teams are announced. The subs are announced for the Tigers and the Blues, and we log into our teams. We panic. We go, oh, I've wanted Chera all preseason, but I haven't got him now. I'm just going to get him. And I dive into him and throw out a Clayton Oliver to get there. We make these last-minute panic things when we're not being clinical about it in these final few days.
Know the players that you want from that game in particular.
Yeah.
And lock those in a way. This is where we started, and I think we're getting towards the end here, but those players become the most important, because you got a whole 24 hours to think after that game, basically. You get to sleep on Thursday night. You get to have a tinker on Friday morning and into the Friday afternoon. We get the extended squads cut from the Sunday games down to their 23, and we get more information. We get another set of subs with the Essendon versus Hawthorn game as well. We have coaches saying intentions, things coming out, media reports coming out. That 24 hours of information is great, but having those key players locked away that you're happy enough with on that Thursday night just means that you don't get into that state of panic, because those are the only players you need to be thinking about when team sheets come out and when those subs come out. Only those two teams to start off with, because then you've got time. Then you've got the ability to figure it out from there.
Yeah, I think you should know by now, as you're watching or listening to this episode, which Tigers and which Blues you're happy to pick. There shouldn't be any shocks that come on those Thursday night or early afternoon teams, depending on where in the world you're living, that go, that's it, I have to get into a Tiger, I have to get into a Blue. Now, different if they're a late out or a sub, that's a different conversation. But you shouldn't be making changes and trades and player movements while we trust and hope and believe that the game formats can withstand tens of thousands of coaches on the platform at one given time, you just don't want to risk it, do you? Where you're playing around with things in these last minute, the app crashes on you, you can't get back in. And
you
all of a
forget
sudden,
to put an emergency on.
Oh my gosh. Camporelli goes 80, Trainer goes 70, and all of a sudden they're just sitting there. And while you've banked the points and the cash generation, you're just stuck. And so maybe we should share a few last minute advice things. That's a really nice starting point for us about just knowing where the lockouts are, being clinical about it, address Thursday at Thursday, Friday at Friday. You'll have that 24 hours to do. I think that's some good last minute advice. Have you got some other last minute things? We've got a full checklist episode to check out as well on the channel that'll help you. But any other pieces before we wrap up this strategy session?
Don't panic. Don't get FOMO. You know, you've done all of your research this entire preseason. You don't want to be pressured into owning a particular player 15 minutes out from lockout that you haven't owned in the entire preseason just because someone has an opinion about them. Back in the work that you've done, back in the people that you trust, the people that you've listened to, the eye test that you've put yourself through in terms of the players that you like, and go about picking them. And try not to get too focused on what your round one rank is in eventual, because I heard the stat come from Lemon's Patreon podcast today, and it's like, I think none of the winners of AFL Fantasy in the past 5 or 6 years have started after round one inside the top 10,000.
Yeah.
Which is pretty wild. Like, you don't have to start off winning the game because it's a trading game. You know, you got 5 weeks of boosts, 3 trades. You can use 15 trades in SuperCoach and Dream Team pretty quickly if you want to. 2 trades a week, every week in AFL Fantasy, best 18 for rounds 2, 3, and 4. There is so much time. Worry about where your picks are and who you've got, not what they've scored. If they've got the role, if they've got the ability, they're in the team's best 22. It'll all come out in the end. But don't stress about what goes on in round one, because in reality, we're playing a 24-week-long season. There's a long way to go.
Yeah, the focus almost from now, barring if the player you have doesn't get named or they get subbed, should probably, after listening to this episode, start to move quickly into observing what happens in round one and what are the changes I need to make in my team. You're going to make mistakes, and I use that as an inclusive terminology that includes injuries and suspensions, that had you known what you know on Tuesday next week, you wouldn't have made that selection, but you didn't. Get on base, as Minnie said. Get your team there. You're going to have messed something up, a loophole, a captain, a player. It's totally okay. Your first 4 to 6 trades are going to be fix-ups, and it's now about getting ahead of the pack, making moves before others make them, and not being so reactionary, and making sure you set yourself up in a space where you're with and ahead of the pack, not constantly chasing. You're going to be chasing for a week or two. That's totally okay. But you need to move to that place really, really quickly. If you want some other advice episodes, by the way, on the channel, we did a last-minute checklist. It's got all the things about checking for subs, checking for fixtures, knowing these elements. Make sure you go and check that out. Even the most experienced of coach, FOMO, fear, energy, panic, all those things we are all prone to. Go and check out that episode. It's 10, 15 minutes long, but it's just going to help you be really clinical about this week of footy ahead. And I think that's the best part, isn't it? We've spent days, weeks, months preparing for this week and for this season. Now it is here. Now it all commences, and now all the fun stuff really gets underway. Hey, Minnie, we've only got one more episode on the coaches panel this preseason to go. It's a Q&A episode. It comes out in about 24 hours time from when this lands. So just the one more episode, but mate, you've been an absolute star for the community yet again this pre-season. We wish you all the best for the upcoming fantasy year. I know you're going to help us navigate it every step of the way.
Thank you very much. And you've been an absolute stalwart this pre-season. You've done an episode a day since the start of the new year, all the way up to the start of round one. It's a mammoth task. I know your wife's going to be happy to have you back a bit more often and just have to do the couple of episodes a week instead of one every day. Yeah, well, I think she will be. I think I want to say, and not just to behalf of myself and coaches panel, but probably everyone in the community, thank you very much for the work that you've done this preseason, and enjoy a little bit of downtime and enjoy round one, everyone else as well. It should be fun.
Yeah, it's going to be awesome. I hope you've enjoyed the preseason with the coaches panel. Still one more episode to go before we hit the official start of it. Thank you so much. If you've watched any one of our episodes this preseason, we're so thankful for you, especially if you've subscribed and you've liked and commented on videos. We love engaging with you in that space. So too, if you've been a loyal audio podcast listener for, I think it's about the past 8 or 9 years that the coaches panel has been rolling through now. We're so thankful for you. And again, if you've given us a 5-star rating or a positive review, we thank you so much for doing that. We have an incredible team here behind the scenes at the coaches panel. While you often only hear and see from myself, Minnie, Louis, Kane, Jordox, there is a bunch of other guys that are behind the scenes. Fox, Jimmy, Tim, just to name a few that are regularly helping us with the content that you hear coming out and through these speakers all the time to you. So we're super thankful for them, and also to our loyal Patreons that have jumped in, supported, whether it's because they want to get the extra bonus content that lands their way, and it's still not too late to do that because in season they get a bunch of exclusive stuff, 2 additional podcasts we drop a week that are behind the paywall exclusively. Our premium tiers get a round review, and then every other Patreon gets a Q&A episode that lands. So they are getting a ton of content. So if you want to get that, jump on and become a Patreon. But we're so thankful for them. But really, we're thankful for you too, for spending the whole pre-season with us. An episode a day. Hey, you've heard a lot of my voice since January 1. I do not apologize for it. I thank you for listening. We wish you all the best for the upcoming fantasy footy year. And we'll be back with you tomorrow for our final episode before we hit go on the 2025 fantasy footy season.